But according to what he is taught, he must first do exactly what the law of Moses said he should do. Go to a priest and confirm it. And so he would go towards a priest, and as he goes there, he shows the mark, and they look at it, and they study it, and he says, you're unclean. You must now put on rags, cover your face, and now instead of people looking up to you when they see you, you must announce yourself beforehand that you are unclean. And you no longer can live within the city boundaries. You must now live outside of the city. Can you imagine how he felt going from a position of high worth to one in this other direction? Can you imagine how he felt and wondering how he taught many times about why sin comes in? See, in those days, the belief of leprosy came from the fact that at a time, Miriam had spoken out against Moses. And in doing so, she contracted a disease. And so many believed that there was a correlation between the murmuring and the leprosy. And we saw that Moses during that time would beg God not to allow this to happen. And Lord said, for 7 days, keep her outside of the community. And for 7 days, she was outside. They couldn't move anywhere forward. And eventually, she was healed. That became a traditional thought that got passed down through Jewish custom. And the belief was that if you received the disease, it had to be because of a sin you had committed. And so for a Pharisee, this was a huge blow. Another man was maybe down by a shipyard. He had a business. He was rich. He was powerful. He had a wife and a son. And one day his son would take over his business. He wasn't ready for what was about to happen. As he was talking to his wife, she came and looked at the back of his ear and said, honey, you got a mark back there. There's a scar. There's something there. And she says, maybe you need to go and see the priest. And so he goes. And it's confirmed. You too must wear the garbs. You too must wear the rags. You too must live outside of the city walls. And announce yourself, for you too are unclean. Can you imagine him having to go back to his wife and explain this to her? You can't come near me. You and my son need to take over the business. And then he leaves. Another man just had a small little shop. He was a family man. He had his children there. He enjoyed his life. He enjoyed his children. But one day, he too found a mark. This one on his toe. And he too was confirmed. His family prayed, and yet nothing different happened. He put on his rags and left to live outside of the city gates. Two friends from childhood. As they were growing up together, they enjoyed playing and they had a lot of fun. As a matter of fact, they were together ever since their birth. Their mothers were best friends, but not as close as they were. They'd grown up and gone to school together and started their own business together. They're doing very well until one of their friends ended up finding out that he had the illness. He went in tears and told his friend, we can no longer be close together. His friend says no, and he comes up to him, grabs a hold and says, you don't understand. I've got leprosy. And he says, I care about you. And within months, the other friend ended up with leprosy. A man had three sons. And with the three sons, what was exciting is the fact that they had just gotten married. And he was soon to be a grandfather. He was excited at everything that was going on. Life was looking good for him. His hope was he would have 3 grandsons. As time was going by and things were happening, as he was looking around at his family and enjoying their presence, enjoying the company of his daughter-in-laws, he noticed a mark on him, on the side of his nose. He too went to a priest, and he was confirmed. And the sadness that came in his eye, knowing that he may never see his grandchildren, he would also have to live on the outside of town. Eventually, the priest looked at his hands. The hands that he would use to bless, the hands that he would use to take care of people, and he saw the blemishes on himself. He went to another priest and said, "Do you think this is what it is?" He already knew what it was about. He saw the discoloration. He saw the hair follicle that was turning color. He saw the wound that was there, the numbness that was in his hand. And he too had to put on the rags and step outside the city grounds. There was another. He was betrothed to be married. He was looking forward to it. He was getting his house all prepared because soon he will take a horse, go down to the house of his future bride, place her on it, and bring her home. It was only months before the wedding. As he was finishing arrangements in the home, he looked at his elbow, and there was a mark. He too went to the priest. And he was told to put on the rags, to announce that he was unclean, and he too must be outside of the city walls. And then there was one that was already outside of the city walls. You see, he wasn't allowed to come into the city just because of his heritage, because of his history, because of his class. But he found out that he also had the disease. He that was once scorned and outcast, rejected within his own community, now found himself scorned twice, rejected twice, placed outside twice than ever before. If you want to read about it, you can find it in Luke chapter 17, verse 11. Because as you go there, you see that, in the Old Testament, it's interesting because it would say that if you touched a person that was a leper, what happens? You become unclean. But in New Testament, everything changes when Jesus comes, because now when you touch a leper, the leper becomes clean. I wonder what it was like for them to sit together and go through at night, an unusual group of individuals from different classes, different castes, different values, different vocation, different upbringing. They were different in many, many ways, but the one thing that they had in common was they all had the disease. The one thing that they had together was the illness that they knew would be the end of them. They might have sat around a fire, and maybe there were ones that were taking care of each other when one couldn't take care of the other. Leprosy was a disease that took away your ability to feel the pain as things were deteriorating and falling apart. Fingers and tips of fingers would fall off. Individuals' nose and maybe their lips or ears would start degenerating to the point that they would be gone. And as they watched themselves becoming disfigured, they continued for whatever way possible to show each other compassion and love. Individuals that if they were whole never would have done that if they saw themselves outside the place they were at. And so by that fire they sat together. Day in and day out they would wait for a family member to bring some food to outside of the city gates and lay it down. They would look over and tears would be on their family member's face, knowing that they could never embrace their loved one again. But from a distance, they could see how quickly they were deteriorating. They would come and take the food and maybe even read some letters, but they know that they couldn't give anything back because it would have transferred the disease. Can you imagine their heart and how they felt? Can you imagine the struggles? This one lover, as far as in looking at his future bride, and as he tells her, I'm not going to be coming back. And can you imagine her voice saying, I'll wait for you? And yet knowing that maybe he will never return. They heard stories about Jesus.